Welcome. My name is Shelby Buno, and I'm the Director of Data Use here at the Tennessee Department of Education. Today is the second week of the weekly webinar series, and today we're going to be focusing on deep dives into the landing page, explore data pages, and the analyze needs pages. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to send those over in the chat, and I will address as many of those as possible during the meeting and follow up with any that I am not able to address directly today. With that, let's dive in. The agenda for today includes, we're going to do a quick review from the last webinar. That will include how to access InformTN, as well as a high-level walkthrough of InformTN. We then will walk through deep dive topics, focusing on the landing page, explore data page, and the analyze needs page. We'll have time for questions after each of those. And then we'll just close out with some additional information, including available resources and future webinar topics. So as a review from last week, on the screen right now, you'll see instructions for accessing InformTN. There are two ways to access InformTN. The first is option 1, which is on the screen right now. It involves navigating to the Orion Single Sign-On platform at tneducation.net, signing in, selecting the ePlan icon, and then navigating to your annual plan for the 2020 year. When you open that up, InformTN will launch on your screen. Option 2 involves navigating instead to just edplan.tn.gov and selecting the login with TDOE Orion. In this way, you'll then log into that Orion single sign-on, and then InformTN will launch on your screen. If you have any questions about accessing InformTN, please send those over. Particularly if you have concerns around actually accessing single sign-on and you've never done so before, please send those to dt.support@tn.gov. If you have any concerns around your roles in ePlan, please send those to eplan.help. Each of those email addresses, you can now see, each of those items you can now see on the board. So as a reminder, you will need access to both Orion Single Sign-On and a planning role in ePlan. If you do not have access to Orion Single Sign-On, you can see instructions on the screen right now for getting your account set up. If you do not have a planning role in ePlan, you will be expected to submit a user access form to get that role established in ePlan. If you already had roles in ePlan for planning because you've worked on the plan in the past, you've approved the plan in the past, etc., those roles will carry over and you do not need to submit a new user form. So just to review, if you already have roles in ePlan and you've done planning in the past, your roles will carry over. You do, though, need to have single sign-on in order to access this InformTN. As a reminder also, that the roles that you see on the screen right now, those are the planning roles. So you do need to have one of these roles that are on the screen in order to be able to edit InformTN. And again, at the bottom of the screen, you can see this ePlan help at tn.gov. That is where you can direct questions if you have any concerns around your roles in ePlan. With that, now, after reviewing some access information, we're now going to just review high-level InformTN walkthrough. So, as we discussed yesterday, and we're going to walk through this again in the tool today, your landing page, which is where one of the items we're going to focus on today, provides information on the current status of your plan, provides an opportunity to receive messages and send messages on important updates, information about key dates, and is a way to access each of your school's plans, as well as the status of each of those schools' plans. Your Explore Data page, this is your data section. It allows you to go in and see your data, have discussions around your data, see how you compare to various benchmarks, as well as be able to download images and capture insights to be able to analyze later. Finally, your Analyze Needs page, this is your centralized warehouse for capturing insights. It also is an area in which you can add additional insights. You can then use that space to sort, group, and prioritize your needs. The sections which we're going to be speaking on, these next sections will be the focus for future webinars. The Prepare to Plan page is where you will describe your team and your stakeholder outreach and dig into those root cause analysis. Your Upload Documents is the opportunity to provide additional supporting materials. There are no documents that are currently required for districts, but there is the requirement that Title I schools submit their Title I budgets in this space. You'll then develop your plan. This is where you're actually creating those goals, action steps, and strategies that are aligned to those prioritized needs. And you'll reflect on your plan, which is where you'll be asked to answer questions regarding how your plan addresses key focus areas. And finally, your review and submit. This is your confirmation page where you can review all of the information that you submitted as part of your plan, as well as submit those plans if you are the director of schools in the district or the principal in schools. And so each of these sections that are on the screen right now, these are going to be topics of future webinars. Today, though, we're going to focus on the landing page, the Explore Data page, and the Analyze Needs page. Before we move into those deep dive topics, I wanted to pause to see if there were any questions regarding any of the information that was shared during the last webinar, and that we just very quickly reviewed. Okay, hearing no questions, let's go actually into the deep dives for this week. So as I said a moment ago, the deep dives this week are on the landing page, the Explore Data page, and the Analyze Needs page. So with that, I'm going to actually open up the tool and be able to actually click through each of those individual pages. On my screen right now, you should see the landing page for the demo site. This is looking at a demo district. What you'll notice about the landing page is that it has a few key pieces of information for you, as well as ways to navigate through the tool. So on the left upper side, you'll see the status. The status provides an indication regarding the status of your plan, as well as individual sections. So for example, you can see that overall this plan is in draft. That means that the user has come in here, the district leader or the school leader, they may have made some changes, but the plan is not ready for submission at this time. There's additional things that would need to be done in order to submit this plan. Examples of status include draft, ready, approved, changes required, and submitted. The technical guidance document lays out all of the different definitions for this and is a great resource if you're reviewing your status and you have any questions. You then will see each of the sections down below that corresponds with one of the tabs across the top. Each of these sections require the user to take an action of some sort. And so there's requirements, therefore, that are attached to each. As each of those requirements are completed, you will get this green check mark saying that that section has been completed. This is not a quality check. It is only a check on whether each of the boxes, each of the actual required components have something written in that section. So again, this is not a quality check. It is more just saying that section has been completed based on the minimum requirements of what needs to be added into each of the boxes or captured. Once all of these are green, your status will change to ready, which means the plan is ready to be submitted. The next thing you'll notice on this page is that for districts only, you will see the list of your schools. You can sort through the schools using the status bar, so you can see what status. Maybe I want to see how many of my plans have been submitted, how many of my schools' plans are ready to be submitted, how many of my school plans are approved eventually. And you can use this to sort for those. You can also use this to search for one of the schools if you want to select a particular school and dive right into it. You also can directly open up the school plan by clicking on the school's name right here. The next thing in the top upper right-hand corner is messages. This is a place where you can receive messages regarding important updates. This could include updated data, the fact that the planning window is open. Each of those messages will also be sent to the email address that is attached to your account. You can then view them in both your email or in the tool directly. And finally, you have your planning calendar. In your site, you'll actually see the dates that were for planning for 2018, but this is just intended to remind you of key dates on when the planning window opens, when plans are due, for example, and the same for school plans. And so this kind of landing page is intended to just provide a navigation place so you can navigate to each of these different sections or to particular schools, as well as to provide at a high level some quick information regarding both your plan as well as the plan for any of your districts and any of your schools. So with that, now let's dive into the Explore Data section. So the Explore Data section is really this is where all of your data is. And so there's a good amount of data in here, and I'm going to walk through and kind of give a high level information about all of the data that's included in here. But as you are diving in, if you have any questions or if you have questions as I'm going through this, please feel free to send any questions you have today in the chat, but you also can send questions to myself if you have additional questions that come up as you're looking through your data. In addition, the technical guidance document, which is posted both on the planning website and in TDOE resources, has additional information regarding each of these different data points. So with that, the data, when you first come into the Explore Data section, you will come to the dashboard. The dashboard is organized basically to have a few verticals as you go down the page. It's intended to give you high-level information regarding your district or school. So you can see, for example, it's organized into 4 sections. Those 4 sections include climate and access, educators, academic achievement and growth, and college and career readiness. You also at the bottom will be able to see your comparable districts, and be able to see which actual districts are included in that comparison group, as well as what are the characteristics here that generated that comparison. So each of these individual 4 sections corresponds with one of these tabs along the top. So let's say, if I was looking at climate and access, I would potentially go to the climate and access tab to dig in even deeper. So here I can see, similar to my first page, I can see chronic rate of school, I can see discipline, and I can see some information on English language learners. For previous years, and eventually you will also be able to see information on your special education program, as well as information on health. All of that information is contained here. And I can dig into each one of these individually. As I dig into a particular section, I can then scroll down to dig even further. So for example, I selected discipline. I then can dig in deeper and see how discipline looks like overall, as well as how in-school suspensions look, and out-of-school suspensions, expulsions, and remands. I can then dig in even deeper and see how these rates vary by grade. I can see how the rates vary by student groups. And so you see I clicked this, and so it is updating below. And so there's a lot of information in here that you can piece through and work through and be able to get a sense of where am I seeing differences or gaps between different student groups. Where am I seeing particularly outliers, maybe in terms of grades or particular schools? So at the district level, you can also see schools. And so you can see each of these pieces of information and dig into them. You can also see trends. So you can see how has this rate changed over time. And then finally, at the very bottom, you can actually have additional resources at your fingertips. So let's say you actually wanted to go to EIS to dig even deeper into maybe some of the student level data. You could go directly out into EIS from this page. And so each of the individual sections and each of the individual data points has a similar kind of structure. So, for example, let's also now dig into the college and career readiness. Before I do so, though, let me give you a high-level just reminder of what kind of data is in each of these sections. So the climate and access data, this data has information, as we just saw, on chronically out of school, discipline, English language learners, and eventually we'll have information on special education programs as well as health. The educator section has information regarding teacher retention, some educator survey information regarding perception, as well as information regarding staffing characteristics. For example, what percentage of your teachers or educators are diverse, which percentage are novice teachers, what percentages are male teachers, for example. And each of these are broken out by different staff types. So you can see, for example, how does my retention vary based on the particular type of staff type. So is my retention higher, for example, for teachers versus librarians, or teachers versus administrators? And so you can see down here that this is the distribution of how my retention looks for different types of educators. And you can see again that this follows a similar pattern. And anytime I click up here, what's below will update. And so now I can look at academic achievement and growth. For academic achievement and growth, at the state level, we'll see success rate by each of the different, at the state and district level, you'll see success rates for your 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12. You also will see overall growth for 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12 aligned. The success rates and the overall growth will be aligned to accountability. As you move down the page, though, and you move actually into particular subjects, that will include all students who have a valid test. And so all students will be included so that you're considering all students as you do your planning for the following year. And finally, college and career readiness. College and career readiness section contains information on ACT, on early post-secondary, on CTE concentrators, on graduation and ready graduate information, as well as post-secondary enrollment. One thing to note is while the other pages were organized by date, and I'm going to walk through how you change that date, etc., the college and career readiness page is organized by cohort. This means that we're looking at the 2017 cohort. As you look at the data, therefore, if I pick a 2019 cohort, for example, those students would only have completed their sophomore year when this data was last collected. Therefore, the rates for their early post-secondary earning at that point might be lower than you would expect for, let's say, a senior class. So just as a reminder, they're organized by cohort and not annual, and so take into account what you would expect to see from that particular cohort when you think about this data. The idea, though, is it allows you to see how are those students beginning to earn those early post-secondary courses and those CTE courses, even as they're beginning their high school career in those first few years. So as we move for example, as an example, we'll look at early post-secondary. On the early post-secondary page, I can see those who met one or more benchmarks, one or more episodes, 2 or more episodes, or enrolled in 4 or more episodes. As a note, right now, the episodes that are included in here are AP, state dual credit, and dual enrollment. We are working very hard to begin to include an even wider, diverse set of early post-secondaries, eventually aiming to include IB and CLEP and industry certifications and all of the other available opportunities. But for right now, it only includes AP, dual enrollment, and state dual credit. Let's look at the ACT one. So when you look at ACT, you'll be able to see how what percentage of students are college ready, which is scoring 21 or higher on the ACT composite. as well as for each subject, what percentage of students are meeting the benchmark for that particular subject. You can then dive in and see how that varies for different student groups and think about, where am I seeing gaps? Where am I seeing differences between different student groups? You also can then think about how you can start having closing some of those gaps. As you scroll down the page, you can see how this cohort has compared to other cohorts. The 2019 cohort is still may not have had as many opportunities for retake, for example, which might be why they're a little lower right now. And then finally, you can see what the distribution looks like across different bands. And so similarly for CTE, you can see how many students are enrolling in each of the different career clusters. For post-secondary enrollment, you can see what are the top 10 institutions that my students are going on to. For early post-secondary, you can take a look at what are the major types of early post-secondary that my students are enrolling in. And so there's a wide breadth of data that's in here. And so it becomes a centralized place that you can come and look at a wide range of data all in one place, and all with very similar structures. Before we move on, I want to really call out a few really key pieces of functionality that are in here. One is that when you come in here, your benchmark will be set to comparable districts. You can change your benchmark to be versus comparable districts, versus your core region, versus previous year, versus the state, or versus multiple districts. If you click multiple districts, you can actually select at least 3, but up to as many as you'd like, comparison districts that you would like to compare to. If you hit close and apply, it'll apply those comparisons. I'm actually going to compare against previous year. When I compare against previous year, you'll see that I get these bars in the bottom of each of my graphs, as well as I get these orange dots on each of my graphs. Those orange dots and these bars across the bottom, those indicate the data from the previous year. For each of mine are very close in percentage to the rate from the previous year. Therefore, they're gray. If I was outperforming the benchmark, if I was doing better than last year or better than my comparable district, that bar would be green. If I was doing worse, that bar would be red. And so it provides a benchmark to think about how am I doing versus last year, how am I doing versus the state, versus my region, versus districts that are kind of comparable to me, or a set of districts that I would like to compare myself to. Another key piece of functionality I want to point out is that you can actually use this toggle to select a different year. So let's say I'm looking at climate and active data, for example, and I actually want to look at the 2016-17 data. If I click 2016-17, all of the information will update for the 2016-17 school year. Go back to 2017-18. You also have some really cool functionality to be able to take this information and have discussions around it, or both in the tool as well as take the information with you to share with other stakeholders. So this little word bubble in the corner, you can use this to launch discussions. And those discussions are 100% internal to your district or school. So we as the state cannot see the discussions that you all have around your data. Your download image button. This allows you to download the image and take it with you to share with various stakeholders. And so that's, again, this download image button. And then this capture insight button. This is a big piece. Capture insights basically allows you to say, this is something that I think is interesting and that I want to dig into further, and that I might want to consider as I'm eventually developing my plan. And so think about key capture insights as these are things I want to save because I need to dig into them further, I want to think about them further, and I really want to focus on these points. And so that's what the capture insight button will do. And so let's say I'm going into my discipline data and I'm looking at let's say I'm looking at it by grade, and I noticed that my high school grades seem to have much higher, my middle school to high school grades have much higher discipline. And I want to save that because it might be something I want to work on in the future. I can hit capture insight, and I can write disciplinary rates peaking in grades 7 through 12. So I can write myself a little note that reminds me, basically provides a title for the image that I've captured and reminds me why I captured and what I captured, and I can hit send. What'll happen is when I hit send, it's actually going to take that need and it's going to populate it on my Analyze Needs page. And so if I look here, I can see right here, I can see the image I was just looking at. I can see the note that I put on it. And if I click on it, I can actually see the little note, and I can see the image that I captured. So we're going to actually, in a moment, dive deeply into the Explore data, but I wanted to take a moment to see if there are any questions regarding the Explore data page before we move into the Analyze Needs page. And so one of the questions that I'm seeing right now is about how we change comparable districts. So that's a great point to review. So in order to change what your benchmark is, you would hit Adjust Filters, you would select Benchmark, and you would see the various choices. If you wanted to click, for example, Previous Year, you can hit Previous Year, and then Close and Apply. And your data will update to show that as your comparison, which you can see here. If you would instead want to change it to multiple districts, there's two steps, one more step. You have to hit multiple districts, and then you actually have to come down to comparison districts and select which districts you want to be compared to. You need to select at least 3 districts. There's no maximum, but you need to select at least 3. So I can click a few districts. It'll tell me here how many districts I selected, and I can hit Close and Apply. The data will take an extra moment to update. I can see here which districts I picked, and once my data is done filtering, it will actually update. It'll calculate the average of those and then update to compare me versus my comparable districts. I can go back and switch to multiple previous years if I prefer. Any other questions on the Explore data page before we move on to the Analyze Needs? Okay, I don't see any other questions. If there are questions that come up, please feel free to send those up. So the last section we're going to dive into today is the Analyze Needs section. So as I said a few moments ago, on the Explore data page, that Capture Insight button basically takes a picture of the data that you want to save, and it allows you to provide a title, and it sends that screenshot to your Analyze Needs page. Your Analyze Needs page then becomes basically a central repository for all of the needs that you have captured and all of the important pieces of data that you've captured as you've reviewed your data and analyzed your data. You also have the ability to add additional data. So if you see in this corner here, there's a button you can click, and it allows you to add additional data. So let's say I wanted to add additional data regarding maybe RTI screeners. And so I might want to add information regarding, from my RTI, universal screener. Maybe my screener is implying that I have particular skill deficits among grade 3 students. And then I might specify what those actual deficits are that I want to figure out how I can get better at serving. I can write a description. I can classify it into a section. So maybe I want to put in academic achievement and growth. You can also upload a file. So let's say I want to upload information regarding the actual data that's underlying it. I can use this little browse and actually upload that data. Maybe instead I have an image that I want to upload. I can use this little image button and I can actually upload an image, whether that be from PowerPoint or an image maybe from Excel, and I can put that image right into here so I can see that piece of data among all the other data that I have. So if I hit save, it'll populate an additional card at the bottom here, almost like a sticky note that you have on here. That will also include both the data that you captured in the Explore data pages, as well as the additional data that you may add based on your local or data that you have that we may not have at this state. And so, therefore, this Analyze Needs page really can become a centralized repository for all of your data and all of the important pieces of data that you want to capture and bring together and consider as you eventually create your plan. The Analyze Needs page has a few key pieces of functionality that I want to review. Across the top, I have some ability to make filters and drop-downs. So I can filter. The filters include your ability to basically filter what you're seeing below. So you can filter on archive versus active needs, which we'll discuss what that means in a moment. You can filter on whether you've marked it as a priority or not a priority. You can filter it based on section, so I can see what are the needs I've classified as from climate and access, for example. So if I click that, I'll only see the ones that are tagged as climate and access. Say I want to reset or I click it accidentally, I can just hit this reset button and it'll bring me back all my sections. I can also use the search. So I can, if I want to see what ones did I mention discipline in, I can search discipline and I'll see only the cards that have discipline in the title or description. I can also sort based on the date or the title. And so this bar at the top really is intended to help me filter and sort through all of the cards that are on my page. You also have the ability to actually edit and interact with each of these individual cards using this bar at the bottom. So if I want to edit the need, I would hit edit, and this allows me to come here and I can type in an additional description. I can change the title, for example. I can change what section it's tagged to. I can add additional supporting materials, and then I can hit save, and it'll update that. So you can see I updated the title. I can also archive it. If I archive it, this is like putting the need into your deleted folders. So it doesn't delete it forever. It just basically removes it from the front page. So let's say hit archive. I now no longer can see that one. But if I ever need to get to my archive needs, I can click archive and I can see all of the needs that I archived and I can bring it back if I want to, for example. And I can bring it back by just hitting this unarchive button and then going back to my active needs. I can copy. Let's say I want to, we're going to go over grouping in a moment, but let's say I want to copy a particular need. I can also copy it in order to add it into various groups. If I want to delete a need, I actually have to open it up and then by clicking on the title and then hit delete. We did this because if you delete, it is deleted forever, which means we cannot bring it back. So I really strongly advise you to use this archive functionality, which allows you to bring back that need if you do need it in the future, because deleting is permanent. It does not, once you delete that need, it cannot be brought back. So now let's talk about, now you have some abilities, some ideas on how to sort it, how to edit it, but what do we actually want you to do on this page? What we actually want you to do on this page is to take a look at all of your needs and consider what needs are related and how might I group those together in order to group together those needs that have similar underlying root causes and that are related. So for example, across the top here, I've captured several different needs that are related to discipline and chronic absenteeism. When I'm writing goals, strategies, and action steps, I might consider how I'm thinking about and improving climate overall in my schools, and therefore write some strategies and action steps that are aimed at addressing both my discipline and my chronic absenteeism concerns. In that case, I might choose to group these needs together into a single group. So I can group them by clicking the select button in each of the corners. And then I can click, once I've selected many of the ones I want, I can hit group 6 needs. And I'm going to call these climate and act. And then I can hit group. So see now I have this group. And I can see in here all of the individual ones that I've captured. I can click on them and see the individual image that I captured. And I can edit this, I can copy, I can archive eventually, and I can delete. So you can do that. So now similarly, I might group together these ones that are around grades 3-5 ELA. So as you go through all of those needs that you've captured, you're going to group them together into ones that are related. Where do you see similarities in terms of similar root causes? Where do you see similarities in terms of how you're going to actually begin to address those needs? As you go through and group them together, you're all then going to be, say, you might form, I don't know, 5 to 10 groups or so, maybe more, maybe less. What you're going to then want to do is say, out of all of these groups and individual needs, where do I actually want to spend my time this year? What are the few areas, the 3 to 5 areas approximately, that I really want to move the needle on? And then I'm going to write my goals, strategies, and action steps aligned to. What are my priorities? For any of those items that you say this is a priority, you're going to prioritize it by clicking this little prioritize button at the bottom of the card. You'll notice that when I hit that, the bottom changed from this blue to this green. And what that's saying is that this is something that I want to move. There is a difference between what I'm seeing in my data and where I want to be. And those are the areas that I want to plan my goals, strategies, and action steps around. And so that is really kind of what the goal of this page is to get to a point where you have these groups that you have set a few priorities among that you really then will dive into on the next couple of pages and do some root cause analysis for, as well as then use as the backbone for driving the creation of your goals, strategies, and action steps. And so that is really the end goal of the prioritized needs of this analyze needs page, is to really find, hone in, sort through all of those needs, have all of their needs in the same place, and then be able to begin to set priorities on where you actually want to focus your time and focus the goals and strategies and action steps. And so with that, that covers the vast majority of kind of the key functionality that we went over, that I wanted to go over today. We covered a lot. There's a lot of pieces, both in the Explore Data page and the Analyze Needs page, that are very different than what you probably saw in the previous tool. And so I wanted to take some time now to see if there are any questions regarding any of the information that we've shared before we move on. Okay, and hearing no additional questions, I'm going to review a few additional pieces of information, and then we will close out for today. So we wanted to just, before we close, just again highlight a few available resources that you all will have at your fingertips. So first is that all of these webinars are being recorded and will eventually be posted both to the ePlan TDOE resources as well as to the state planning website if you want to review them in the future. In addition, on the state planning website and in the ePlan TDOE resources, you will find the InformTN technical user guide. This document provides key information regarding the contents and functionality of the new tool, as well as technical assistance in navigating through the tool. And so it's a great resource in combination with the webinars if you have specific questions regarding specific pages. And then I just wanted to highlight the webinar topics in the future, for the next one are going to be focused on some of those next pages. deep dives into the prepare to plan page, the upload documents, develop plan, and eventually they reflect on the plan's components. And so let me just pause now and see if there's any questions. One of the questions I do see is regarding the link. So there's two, let me go back a few slides just to kind of put this back on the screen. And so there's two ways to access ePlan through and to therefore then get to InformTN. Option one is on the screen right now. It involves going to tneducation.net and signing on through a single sign-on, selecting the ePlan icon, and then navigating to your annual page for 2020 to open up your plan. These instructions, the second option is on the screen now, and that's just going directly to edplan.tn.gov. All of this information is also included in that technical guide, and so if you have additional questions or if you want to actually see this in print, that is all available there. We can also again, that technical user guide that I referenced at the end, this InformTN, that is on both the state planning website and ePlan TDOE resource. That has those links and that information for accessing as well. One of the additional questions that we had is that as a group needs, and if we want several people to be able to review and provide comments, what is the best way to facilitate that and capture the comments? So there's two kind of answers to that. One is that when you're on that Analyze Needs page, you can see who captured and grouped each of those different items and who was the last person to update it. So if you wanted to go in there and provide comments, you can either use some of those description boxes in order to actually provide comments. So you could say different names in there. We're also that's also good feedback, and so we're hoping to also eventually be able to have additional commenting available. But the best way to do that right now would be to actually use those description boxes to be able to have different people go in there and just mention their name and say kind of their feedback all in that. And it can all be captured inside that Analyze Needs page. Other questions before we close for today? Well, thank you all for those joined today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.